And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our first speaker of today. Oops, and now the parts where my cards are not updated. So in the past years, we've had some world events from pandemic, climate crisis, war. And those events have changed the way we think, the way we collaborate, the way we interact with each other. And design can be a force that can help us navigating these challenges, and it can be a nice way to make sense of everything that is happening. Our next speaker will tell us a bit more about what could be the mindset and the tool set that can help us go through these unknown unknowns that keep on coming up. The next speaker is a design leader. He has a lot of experience in e-commerce from Calvin Klein, Intersport, and now Adidas. And he is a really familiar face for DTNS. He has been in every edition so far. And today, he's actually taking the stage. Please help me welcome Constantine Gavrykov.
Cool. Thanks.
Good luck.
Thanks. Just bear with me, guys. Ooh, of course, things happening. My mic. Oh, you can hear me already well, right? Let me just fix it. Over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All good? Yeah. I'm gonna move this thing over here as well. As promised, is this possible? We're getting there. I open my laptop. I need my slides as well in front of me. So, nevertheless, good morning, everybody. Just before I jump into the talk, I wanted to say that it's a real pleasure to be. It's the fourth, indeed, like DTNS that I'm visiting, but this time on stage, and also share the stage with such an amazing lineup. I hope you're as excited about the rest of the talks as I am. I already met the speakers. They are great. But also the venue, the organizers, just splendid. So let's jump in. Resilience, design in the age of change. So much has happened, is happening, and is changing. As Ines has mentioned, like the world is constantly changing. So growing inflation, risk of recession. You might have heard about Twitter layoffs, then Meta 2 days ago, Amazon, massive things are happening. War in Europe, of course. But besides that, the rise and falls of trends. And there are plenty of changes happening at Adidas as well at this very moment. I don't know if you were aware, but we are changing the CEO, for instance. Or we recently said goodbye to Yeezy. But not to make it all grim and bad, a lot of good things are happening as well. So for instance, like this very year, the international group of scientists finally cracked the last 8% of human genome, which is massive. The opportunities are vast. Besides that, as never before, we have an amazing opportunity to see for more than 1 million kilometers away from Earth, thanks to James Webb telescope that has been finished as well this year. So the change is affecting pretty much all kinds of fields, like natural, geopolitical, social, industrial, technological, organizational, and of course, personal. This is what we all care about. And the feeling is, am I sounding like louder now? Yeah, I got it. Okay. And the feeling is that the pace of change is increasing when in reality the amount and of changes is basically thickening. So the future is approaching us way faster and the modern time is just compressed. So why should we care, you would ask? Or maybe the right question is, when should we care? Most likely, when the change appears in our lives, we're going to find ourselves in one of the following scenarios. No impact. Luckily, it didn't hit me. It didn't affect me. Great, I can go on my business as before. Or shock. What's happening? I'm confused. I don't understand what to do and how to live further. Or finally, damage. I'm hurt and don't know what to do as well. So usually, in these scenarios, what we see is, and what we feel is fear. And the natural response to fear is fight and flight response, which is the physiological reaction to experiencing mental or physical threat, and this response comes with trigger, which releases the hormones to prepare our body to stay here and fight with the situation right now, or actually flee to safety and find the solution later on. So fight and flight response is nothing new. It has been with our ancestors, and it works exactly the same for us. So if you're in a building that's on fire, it's very unlikely that you're gonna just stop to enjoy the beautiful art that's hanging on the walls. The thing that you're gonna be feeling is the readiness to react, because stress can actually help us make decisions faster in the moment. And in this very moment, it is the most important part. Though, constantly feeling flight or fight response might be dangerous and harmful. Why? Because not all of the changes are immediate. Some of them reveal itself over time, and some of them actually a very long-lasting effect. So what I want to talk about today is a deep dive into greater detail on the anatomy of change, the resilience as a skill, and what design as a discipline plays in it. But before, let's talk about the anatomy of change. Good or bad, it most likely follows 3 stages. Before, which is defined by the preparedness or the lack of such, depending as well on your access to data, forecasting, and how advanced is that. Or, for instance, as some of us or companies and other institutions, we just leave it to chance because we don't have access to the information about the future, and hence, like we have no means of dealing with that. Then we enter during. This is the moment when you need to react, adjust, and maybe change your course of action. Or if you're lucky, of course, like you got prepared so you can deal with that. Most likely during this phase, you're gonna go through surprise, shock, denial, recognition, and if the change is bad, most likely anger as well. Then it's up to you, like what's gonna happen next in the after. You have plausible scenarios. Absorb and recover stress and impact, good, it's fine. Or you might even thrive in altered circumstances if you've done well with the preparation stage, great. Or unfortunately, you can hit the crisis and drown. So to improve our chances as individuals, teams, companies, organizations, let's have a look at how resilience can help us. There's a bright colleague of mine that I've been discussing it, and he has done a very different conversation and talk about the resilience. And he pointed me at this beautiful quote of Dr. Tyron Staiskal. As you can read, resilience is the willingness to actively engage challenge, change, and complexity. But besides that, it's also to allow ourselves to be enhanced by the experience, not diminished. In other words, it is an ability and capacity not only to withstand change and bounce back quickly, but to transform and get better as an outcome. I do think it is a skill that we can obtain, train, and use in practice every time we face the unknown, be it good or bad. While design is the craft of introducing desirable change. Design gives us the tool set and processes on how to present change in any environment to minimize fears as well. And it's also the mindset that lets us embrace the change and react to this. So we're done with the definitions. And before we get to idea and practice, I just need to have a sip of water. To build resilience, obviously, it would be good to understand how to think about change. Here's one of my favorite frameworks that has been introduced by Donald Rumsfeld, former US Secretary of Defense, and then developed by different consultants further. It has 4 states, and you might be familiar with those or you will recognize it. The first one, known knowns, no risks, things we're aware of and understand. Business as usual, it's good. Known unknowns, Those are classic risks. Things we are aware of, but don't understand. And when it gets interesting, unknown nouns, those are hidden facts. Things we don't know, but somebody else does. And they can help you if you manage to find them. The most dangerous in this plethora are the unknown unknowns. Those are the real blind spots, things that we are neither aware of, nor we understand them, and nobody else does. So what can you do is focus on what you can change and skip what you cannot. That's the ground rule. To do that, you need to isolate signal from noise, and also a great approach is to use it as a continuous process and not a one-time exercise, because only that will lead you to a dynamic living approach, kind of like that will help you deal with that at all times. So next, I'm gonna talk about a couple of practical models or approaches and also some examples from my personal experience. Those are 3, and I divided them by before, during, and after the paradigm that you've seen before. So what we see over here is the risk assessment matrix. It's represented by the 2 axes. One is probability. It helps you actually understand kind of how to think about change from unlikely to likely. The other one is impact, from light to severe. The list of our worries sits in the bottom left corner. It's low. The most of our worries and the most obvious thing that everybody jumps on sits in the top right corner. It's the most probable and the most severe impact. And usually, the companies tend to deal with the best and worst case scenarios. But unfortunately, oh, hi, Peter. But unfortunately, it used to lead the companies to the incremental changes. And these incremental changes is not what is truly needed, because when you really need to change the course, you might be actually doing too little. Most interesting opportunities, though, sit in the bottom right corner, extreme but plausible scenarios, because it's a way to break through. The goal of this approach is not to understand which outcome is going to be the most probable. This approach leads us to the possibility to uncover the different ways to compete and win, and to reveal the moves that should prove worthwhile on a longer period of time, despite the change has happened or not. So you're preparing for the different cases and scenarios. Now, add the timeline of change that you are already familiar with to the equation. So before, once again, this is when you are supposed to focus on observing and detecting. The main value here comes from data, both qualitative and quantitative. Then we shift and we jump to during. This is the moment when you need to change from strategic to tactical, react. At this stage, the main value comes from the agility of yourself, of your team, of your organization, the processes that you have in place, in combination with diversity of skill sets, experiences, people coming from the very different walks of life that can bring different perspectives to the table. And it's supported by the modularity of systems, of the architecture, the future-proof, scalable, and so on. That will actually lead to the success, to the resilience in this case. And afterwards, it's the time to recover, but also to document experience. Because the experience means little if you don't accumulate it and don't share it properly. Now, a practical example that I promised, right? So there was pandemic, and it affected many of us, and also our companies, and Adidas is no different. So what happened is that during pandemic, it has caused a massive impact to our supply chain. It started to tamper with our ability to deliver products and also produce them in time, which was leading to a serious impact on our customers' shopping experience, or in general, their trust into our brand and long-lasting relationships. It was the situation that we were facing already in 2021, and we're still dealing with it in 2022, and I don't know if it's going to actually improve anytime soon. So what we've done is we assembled diverse, cross-functional and department task force. We heavily relied on the data-fueled patterns and trends analysis, and we also employed agile, design-driven journey mapping, ideation, and creation of the solutions to address all of these things. 3 things were in our focus: visibility and transparency. This is when we were trying to anticipate and communicate with the customers, what is going to happen, maybe tell them about the possible delays or unavailability of the products. The second thing is transferability. This is when we were trying to address the issue of them not finding what they're looking for with the personalization and with suggestions, in a moment when they're trying to find particular product. And finally, persistence. Persistence is about making sure that they are not hitting any dead ends in their experience, because some of the items might have been disappearing literally during their shopping experience, right there and in the moment. Moving on to the next one, during. During is a nice model developed by the innovation consultant, Jason Clark, from Australia, and he's got this really interesting talk with some ideas that I borrowed, embracing change. It contains 3 different buckets: positive, interesting, and negative. And here I'll jump into the personal experience a bit earlier just to illustrate how to use it. So before Adidas, I was working at Intersport. Intersport is one of the biggest sports retailers in the world, with 6,500 brick-and-mortar stores. And when the pandemic hit, and especially lockdown, we were not prepared. People and the company were in shock, were vulnerable, and we were basically confused on how to proceed from that moment on. So this particular exercise actually helped us to deal with these feelings, understand what we're going through, and try to get out of it. So you start with negative, because this is what's on everybody's mind. You cannot get it out of there. So the things we heard were like, we're scared, we're angry, we're confused, and we also feel powerless. You cannot do much during that moment. So what happens after that is we started to shift perspective to a different bucket, and we indeed started to see something interesting. Lockdown limits shopping possibilities, and gyms are closed, but people actually still work out. The main problem is they don't have the gear and equipment at home. And on top of it, we've seen unprecedented growth in traffic. Why? Because people that used to shop offline, they had to find a new way. So we had a lot of unconventional shoppers that were not prepared as well, to use our experiences and find products online. Older shoppers, or maybe just people that prefer the face-to-face content. And that established the platform for the positives. The world moves on. Demand on sports goods is surprisingly growing. Great. Our vast brick-and-mortar network is closer to customers than any distribution centers. And after all, we have great, knowledgeable staff that is eager to work. So, lockdown magic, this exercise helped us to get and earn, that confidence and to utilize resilience to overcome the initial shock and actually find a lot of interesting ideas. So one of the ideas that I wanted to share over here, and this is the most boring slide, it has a lot of text, and probably you're reading already, but let me still explain it. So we, first in France, and then in the other regions, what we've done is we were among the first with the competition. We utilized our vast network to actually use it as pick-up points for drive-through experience for all of the online orders, while the stores officially were closed, for instance, and staff was out of work. This smart utilization of otherwise dead brick-and-mortar network and staff sitting idle was a win-win for both the customers and the company, actually, and it proved really good. So it is actually thanks to a really scalable and modular universal design system that helped us to address all of the digital journeys and business journeys really fast. But it was also about the great collaboration between digital, retail, and omni. But we needed to really think on our feet and fast. So third and last model is related to after. It's called 4 doors of change. This model demonstrates which doors are open, available, and closed, not available, as you can see. I hope it is understandable over here. So it also allows us to understand the effects of change, big and small. You can use it on your own or with your team, once again, as I mentioned before. But let's go through it. The first door, it's open. Things that you could do before change, you can still do after. Good, nothing changed over here. The second one is closed. Things you couldn't do before, you still can do after. The third one is also closed. Things you could do before, unfortunately, you cannot do anymore. And the fourth one in this case is things that you could have never done before, you suddenly can do after. So the first 2 doors are business as usual, nothing to do about it. The third one, let it go. Remember, deal only with something that you can change. The fourth one, that's the spot, go for it. Embrace the change. Find like the power to understand like what just has happened, kind of like how can you learn from it, and how to break the barrier kind of like from your fear and the impact that you just experienced, and do something good about it. So here, with this example, I want to actually praise our team at Adidas, my design team and the greater team and culture. Some of them are actually over here, hi guys, and some are watching online as well. So obviously we all lived through pandemic, and those were dark times from the mental health and the well-being in general. But they went through the door, that fourth door that got opened afterwards, to build more empathetic, more humane, honest approach to each other based on that challenging experience. This very February, I'm actually from Ukraine, when the war broke out in my home country. My team was there for me at all times without asking. And then I realized that the processes and even that culture kind of like that came out of the pandemic was the reason, besides them just being great and nice people, of course, to genuinely care for how you feel and genuinely care for each other and be there for each other despite how awkward or difficult it could be. Because what you can ask people that are going through a difficult situation, not much, but you can still support them. So a couple of things were there somehow kind of like already in place and then emerged just to support it more naturally. What you see over here, for instance, on the top left corner, this is the ritual that we have every single month when we start our retrospective. We fill this graph of how are we doing. Everybody puts their portrait and a GIF explaining kind of like where they are in a moment, from this chaotic swirl to the smiley emoji. And after that, you can comment on it and share with your teammates as well. And they can ask you right in a moment or maybe afterwards as well. So another one, every Tuesday, it's simple as well. We just have a check-in. Some people join online, some people join offline, where we talk about the weekend. No work is allowed. We literally, as a stand-up, just go about how did it go? Like maybe a walk in the park, or maybe I actually was sick, or maybe, I don't know, like my friends got married. And it really helps bring this human touch to it. Bear with me, we're almost there. last thing I wanted to go through is how to get prepared for what's to come. Literally, it's not only about reacting to the change or thinking about like it when it already happened, but it is about observing what's going on around and trying to look for those emerging trends to understand what is going to happen tomorrow or maybe the day after tomorrow, and establish kind of like what you need to do already today. My go-to topics and fields are AI, robotics, biotech, extended reality, gaming, space, and transportation. Why? Because I don't work in those fields. For you, those fields might be different. The rule over here and the key is go for something that gives you a different perspective. I also look for the social factors like geopolitics, regulation, consumer awareness. And I ask myself at all times these 5 fundamental questions. What connections can we draw between mega and emerging trends and our strategic planning? How does this trend impact our industry and maybe myself as well? How will the wants, needs, expectations of our customers change as a result of this trend? How are the other brands, other people, other companies dealing with this trend, and what can I learn from them as well in terms of failures and successes? And finally, how does this trend inspire us to think about the future? So before I finish with a short video, I just wanted to wrap up saying that indeed we live in the time of constant change, but luckily for all of us here, we work in the business of change. And as designers, like since the moment we signed up for that, we already signed up for the skill and practice to be able to deal with that. So it's up to us to use resilience, to face the future, to break the barriers, embrace change, and let it enhance us.
Look, sport might not be the answer right now, but it teaches us this, that impossible challenges must be faced and overcome. And the reward is joy. And it will always be that way. And now that sport is back, don't waste these chances. Play with more heart, even more fire, and hope that does not end. Seek out what scares you and let your body do what it loves. Nobody knows what the future holds. Nobody knows what will come our way. So honor every breath and respect every chance. Opportunities will come, and we must be ready.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Constantine. Thank you for your presentation. While we wait for some questions that you may have, I have one myself. You showed 2 frameworks, and I'm curious, is it something that you use as a designer on your own, or is it something that you can also bring your team along? And if so, how do you do that? How do you manage to do this type of exercises?
That's a good question, and it's like, thanks for bringing it up. Frankly, some of these things, especially known unknowns, kind of like this is the go-to thing for me at all times, and I've been sharing it with some of my teammates. So like when we're planning for the future of even the organizational changes, kind of like and this kind of stuff. Some other things I tend to use and think more. Obviously, kind of like because this year and the last couple of years were not the most easiest ones, and why not to take control of it? And then you realize that indeed you're not alone over there. Those are the models and practices, and I just shared 3. There are many more as well. Then you can utilize actually on the project base, manner, and pretty much like all of them work as individual thing, but also kind of like they work well in groups as workshops. Maybe even better, like you can put lots of stickies,
Right.
to do that.
Yeah, there's nothing like a good workshop to get everyone together, right?
Exactly.
And is there any? Do you have any preference between these frameworks that you showed? I can imagine that. Well, you mentioned that they can have different outcomes, different moments. But yourself, any preference for any of those?
No, I mean, for me, they're just like not really directly comparable, simply because they're addressing very different things, and you really indeed like need to use them at different times. Actually, in the change, and therefore, no, like I would say, like no preference.
All equal. All right. So we have some questions for you from the audience. So someone says, "Hi, Constantine. Is resilience a team sport or a skill to develop solo?" A bit in line with what we discussed, but
Yeah. Hi there. Thanks for the question. It is a great question. It's not only related to resilience, but I think here I would say again, like it really depends on what you're dealing with. Sometimes the situations are highly personal, and you can't rely on anybody else. So you need to develop that resilience. It can be personal trauma or just happening in your life. But in most cases, what we're dealing with at work, of course, it is a team sport. And it is a team sport not only for a team of 5 or 10, it is a team sport for the entire companies and businesses, maybe countries as well. So I would say it's both.
both. Yeah, makes sense, right? So we solo, but also together. And what level of team maturity is necessary to overcome these challenges in this way?
Really don't want to sound vague, but depending on what kind of challenges, depending on how fast you need to approach it, and but I would say there is no threshold for the team to be mature to start using it. Like you've seen it, that is pretty straightforward. That's exactly why I wanted to share it.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, I think I'm not sure if we have any other. Yeah, we do, from Jeanette. Can you please share with us the name of the designer who designed the Adidas Belgian jersey for the WC?
Okay. Thanks for putting me in the spotlight over here.
This one, I guess.
I will get back to you on this one.
Yes, let's make sure
Thanks,
that Jeanette will know. And we have one more question. How do upper management react to these check-ins where you are not allowed to talk about work on company time? So I guess the team moments you have with your team where you just connect, actually.
I hoped it would be quite obvious, like when I wanted to praise the culture of my company and the team, management doesn't have such reactions to things because, and now I'm gonna really sound like preacher, we do feel empowered to do everything, to do our work best, and I think part of it is really feel good, but also feel fun, and also share the wins and failures together. So it's not that somebody is not allowed to talk about work. If they've been thinking the entire weekend about work, they can bring it up.
That's
sure.
the moment,
That's
right.
also the feeling. Yeah.
Right. It's about what you are experiencing personally, whatever it is, it's welcome. Yeah, that's really nice. And I think we are reaching the end of the... No, we have one more. Wow. Nice, keep on coming. What's the best source for you to keep up with trends? I can imagine that, well, you mentioned the sectors that you keep an eye on to stretch yourself, but what would be the best source to keep up with the trends?
Conferences, I would say, but as much as well people. So people that you meet at conferences and also your colleagues and so on. We also, as a team, have a chat, where we just post the new and unknown, from any kind of categories as well. So you share, and we have a lot of talks about the velocity of learning. Maybe my next topic is
nice
going to
talk
be about
for
that.
next year.
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah. But it is, guys, it's the common thing. Stay curious. Just look for that information wherever you can get it. But diversity in your connections and diversity in the resources you tap into, most likely is going to just bring more tangible results.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is there any website, anything that you usually share with your team on these trends, on how to follow up. Let's say about design trends, UI trends that you keep an eye on.
If you're looking for that silver bullet,
No,
there is no. Like it all
just keep
comes from
curiosity
like
from
the very
every
different
side.
places. Some podcasts, kind of like some. Wired is a great magazine. They also have a podcast. Like it comes out like every week. That's my go-to thing for instance, like for random stuff, but most likely tech-related, policies-related, kind of like regulations-related around privacy and so on, for instance. But on gaming, of course, like you cannot find anything better than Kotaku or IGN. And but find me on LinkedIn. I'll unload on you like the entire, library of things.
All right. Thank you so much, Constantine, for
Thank
your
you very
time.
much.
And you can keep on sending questions. We'll make sure that it comes to you, and you can maybe also grab a coffee with Constantine afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.